Hello everyone, my name is Aaron Christensen. This is Horror 101 with Dr. AC, a gathering place for fellow fiends the world over to discuss all things freaky and frightening. If you want to be part of the conversation, and I hope you do, I invite you to like this video, subscribe to the channel, maybe go back, check out some of our previous episodes, leave a comment, and most importantly, let us know the fright flicks you'd like to discuss in the future. That kind of connection is exactly what we're looking for, and it really does make a difference. We're all about sharing the scare, and we want to hear from you. Throughout the slasher boom of the 1980s, nearly every holiday was offered up on the proverbial chopping block. From Halloween to Valentine's Day to Mother's Day to Christmas, from birthdays to prom nights and everything in between. However, one holiday remained untouched until 1993, when writer-director Mark Jones decided to put a horror spin on a certain date initially designed to honor an Irish bishop, St. Patrick. And when our thoughts turn to Ireland, we instantly think of that mythical creature neatly filed between fairies, elves, and sprites, the Leprechaun. When Leprechaun first premiered 3 decades ago, no one, especially its creators, suspected that they had launched a franchise that would spawn 6 sequels, 1 prequel, and an upcoming reboot. At the time, it was merely a vehicle for an ambitious filmmaker to get his foot in the door. Diminutive actor Warwick Davis was thrilled to land another starring role after 1988's Willow, and a young actress by the name of Jennifer Aniston was simply looking to pad her paltry resume. After the film's Lucky Charms proved a success with horror fans, all the colors of the rainbow turned shamrock green and blood red, and soon there was no stopping the tiny terror, who followed in the footsteps of elder brothers Freddy and Chucky, with his penchant for one-liners accompanying his nasty deeds. Across 30 years and 8 films, our little green man has been all over the place, from the sticks to the strip, from the darkest inner-city alleys to the deepest reaches of space, and he shows no sign of slowing down with his patented brand of creative kills and rhyming criming. He's hundreds of years old, always bold, enjoys his gold, and he'll kill you stone cold. It's the Leprechaun, and he's coming for you. I am very excited to have this conversation with my friends. It's the pot of gold at the end of this long, long rainbow. So I'm going to bring everybody in, and let's say hello to Eric Anderson.
Hello.
Vanessa Morgan.
Hello.
And Gert Verbeek.
Hello from Brussels.
And we are going to be chatting about the entire Leprechaun franchise, starting way back in 1993 with Leprechaun, followed by Leprechaun 2, Leprechaun 3, Leprechaun 4 in space, Leprechaun 5 in the hood, Leprechaun 6 back to the hood, Leprechaun Origins, and Leprechaun Returns from 2018. Thank you for coming on the show, everybody, and welcome. I feel like everybody's required at some point to do a bad Irish accent during the course of this show. Let us get back to the origins of this podcast. I'm going to pass that down to Gert and Vanessa because it was your idea. Happy St. Patrick's Day weekend, everybody, by the way.
Yes, we were just, Gert and I were brainstorming about possible podcasts to do with you, Aaron. And then I was thinking like, well, I haven't seen that many of the Leprechaun movies. So that would be a great idea maybe for St. Patrick's Day. And there we are.
And here we are. This is the deepest dive, by the way. We did 6 films for the Jurassic Park episode. We did 6 films for the Vampires in 1979 episode. But this is the most movies we've ever covered in a single episode. So thank you all for signing on. Eric, you actually volunteered for this.
I did, yeah.
Now, had you seen all of the Leprechauns before?
No, I'd seen the first one and I'd seen Leprechaun in Space. And Leprechaun in Space is just so insane that, when you were throwing out the idea of doing this series, I'm like, yeah, I have to see the rest of that.
Yeah, I feel like it's a badge of honor. My friend John Pata, I know he would do like franchise weekends where they would pick a movie franchise and they would just sit and plow through all of them. Usually there was lots of pizza and, laughter and such. And I know that he did the Leprechaun series in one go as well. I think you were the only one who had seen all of these before. Is that right?
I confess, yes.
It's a badge of honor. You were the one who had been here before, whereas the rest of us were all just, wandering into the Irish fields, not knowing what we were going to get.
I'll admit that I am a sucker for sequels. It started already with the Halloween franchise at some point in the late 90s that I wanted to know what's up with all the Halloween movies. And after that, I mean, it continued. At one point, I wanted to know what's up with all the Leprechaun movies because I only had seen 4 of them in the VHS DVD rental days. When I looked them up at some point some years ago, I wasn't even aware that there was a Leprechaun in the Hood and Leprechaun Back to the Hood. I didn't know. So that was my excuse, like, yeah, I need to know what's up. And so I watched them.
Well, this is an unusual franchise because it doesn't follow any kind of linear storyline. Each one is kind of its own standalone episode. And Gert, when you and I were talking, I mentioned that it's similar to the Paul Naschy, Waldemar Daninsky films, where it's like, yes, it's the same actor. He's always a werewolf, but it's in a completely different scenario. And sometimes there's different backstory. Sometimes there's different powers, different history. It's also similar to like the Godzilla films, where you have different origins. Where he's actually here and we've never seen him before, and then there are ones where it's actually connected. And it reminds me of not so much a TV series, which is how I feel about a lot of franchises, that you're kind of following this very tenuous storyline. But this one is just like, nope, it's another leprechaun in another situation. And there's something to be enjoyed in that, I think.
For me, I really had this feeling when I entered the third one again, Leprechaun in Las Vegas, because suddenly he shows up. He's been turned to stone. There's an amulet. Clearly, there's something happened between the second and the third movie, and that made it feel to me like a TV series, but more along the lines of like how they used to be in the 80s. With standalone storylines. I was thinking, I must have missed an episode, but in this case, there is no previous episodes.
Yeah.
You're just left guessing, which is okay in the end if you consider the whole franchise and where it goes.
What are other people's thoughts? Yeah, go ahead, Vanessa.
I find it a little bit frustrating, the fact that there was no continuity, because you start asking your questions like, what did I miss something before? Did I forget something? Because honestly, I forgot quite a bit from these movies. So yeah, it was a bit frustrating, but then, yeah, not everyone has seen every single film.
Right.
And not starting with the first and then going on. So I think it's fine. Yeah.
Well, it means you can just kind of dive in anywhere. You don't have to be like, oh God, I got to watch the previous 4 episodes in order to, watch Leprechaun in the Hood.
Yeah, but when you try to make sense of it, then you realize, okay, this is just impossible.
Yeah,
there's no sense to it. And I do like continuity, like how installments try to tie in with the previous one and what they kept and what they changed.
Yeah.
But in this Leprechaun franchise, you just need to from the get-go be aware that you just throw the continuity out the window and roll with it, because it gets so absurd.
In some ways, I do like that. I like having just it's another monster, and if you've enjoyed the previous Leprechaun movies, you'll probably enjoy the next one. But you don't have to have seen the other ones in order to enjoy the next one. I think that was a smart move on their part.
Yeah, very smart indeed.
Eric is my next door neighbor. And so Eric came over and we watched at least half of them together. So thank you for shouldering the burden with me.
Yeah. Like I didn't know when I started that they were not connected. I had, just assumed that, the leprechaun in space was the same as the leprechaun that terrorized Jennifer Aniston. But I figured it was just since there was such a long gap between me seeing the first one, which I saw in high school, and seeing Leprechaun in Space, which I saw a couple years ago. I'm like, I must have just forgotten everything. And
let's talk about like kind of the origin, 1993's Leprechaun. That was coming at a time where the slasher boom was kind of, coming to an end. The new, I guess the newest member of the slasher club was Candyman at that point, like 1992's Candyman. And so this kind of came after that. But it also seems very much inspired by the Child's Play movies, where we had kind of a smaller, wisecracking killer who you consistently were underestimating. because of his size. That was immediately what I was thinking. I was like going, okay, this is kind of Chucky, but with a different mythology.
And Gremlins as well.
Except for they're not slashers so much.
Yeah, no, not really. But it was definitely an inspiration for the Leprechauns.
I would say so.
I had this feeling, especially with the second and the third one, that they were trying to do something in the veins of the last few sequels of Nightmare on Elm Street.
Mm-hmm.
A wisecracking villain, supernatural. You've got to have a punchline when you kill somebody. In terms of budget, it felt more like what I think was it New Line Cinema or Miramax were doing with the straight-to-video sequels, like Children of the Corn, stuff like that, or the Hellraiser sequels, as of part 5 and 6. Those still had a bit of like in sync feeling to them all. Whether Leprechaun, just after the third one especially, it ventures off everywhere. I mean, in space.
Literally.
Not in the same league as a Freddy movie. By far not.
I would say it's not in the same league as a Chucky movie. It's like it's kind of a low, it's a low budget franchise. And I was reading online, and like it seems like this is like one of the least respected, let's say, one of the least respected franchises, and yet it has continued to endure and endure. And I don't know what the secret sauce is on that, like why it's continued to be successful.
I would say Warwick Davis.
I think part of it is just taking a leprechaun, which I know, at least in America, we tend to think as little cute, friendly things, and making it this vicious killer. I think that's kind of a fun twist.
Similar to kind of like the My Buddy doll and making that into Chucky, like it's taking something that's benign and friendly, a childhood pal, and turning it into something that's terrifying. And then, of course, we have, in the first film, we have Jennifer Aniston. The next year, she would get on Friends and become a superstar and never look back. But I think that has helped give this one some curiosity so that people might want to go back and check it out.
Definitely, because when you look at some of the posters of the first Leprechaun, it just features Jennifer Aniston very big, and then like the Leprechaun is hidden. So it was really about her, but it really helped the franchise for sure.
Yeah, especially the releases that came afterwards on video and DVD with the badly photoshopped face of Jennifer Aniston big on the cover. Yeah.
But I'm not sure how Jennifer feels about these films.
She doesn't mention it a whole lot in interviews. It's similar to Brad Pitt in Cutting Class or Kevin Costner in Shadows Run Black, Demi Moore with Parasite. It was a stepping stone toward a career. She was a working actor. She wanted to do something, and this was a lead role for her.
Yes.
To that extent, when you mention Demi Moore in Parasite and Brad Pitt in Cutting Class, I think Jennifer Aniston does a better job in Leprechaun than, in terms of salad days.
She's quite funny already, even in that film, I think. Yeah.
I think she is funny. I don't think she's directed very well. Like I think the script isn't great. We should mention Mark Jones, who is the writer-director of this first installment. Good on him, whoever his entertainment lawyer was, because he gets credit in every single one of the sequels as well. They're like based on characters created by Mark Jones, and he just like keeps getting the check in the mail. The basic storyline for the first one is we've got an LA girl, Jennifer Aniston, going out and visiting her dad out in the sticks, and there's a leprechaun in a crate basically down in the basement. He's been caged there from the previous owners.
The O'Grady's.
Ah, yes, the O'Grady's. See, I'm going to lean on you, Gert, to give us our backstory as often as possible. The only other thing I could mention about this first one is that it also features Mark Ralston, who was Francis in Pee-wee's Big Adventure. That was where I recognized him from.
Is he the guy who's a bit like
slow,
simple-minded? Let's put it that way.
Yeah, and Warwick Davis, he'd been a star of the film Willow. He'd also been in the George Lucas Return of the Jedi as one of the Ewoks.
Also listen to the commentary from the 6th movie in the franchise where Warwick Davis is on there. Also talking about the first one. He was really grateful for this role as the Leprechaun because he became so famous as Willow. as a benign character, like a really lovable hero kind of type. He just jumped on the chance to play a villain, to show a different side
Sure.
of his palette. He didn't know for a second that he would repeat the role 5 more times.
Yeah,
I think you can really tell that he has fun with this role, even more so than the spectators. But he himself, he has a lot of fun, for sure.
And what I do like is that they really try to get the comedy and the horror a bit right in terms of the balance. Because at first I think they were trying to go for a more villainous approach, like a horror,
like a straight horror story.
Yeah, creature feature kind of thing. But even before shooting, they already figured out. I mean, maybe it was also producers asking to change some things to go for the horror comedy route. And then we enter again, of course, Freddy Nightmare on Elm Street in the sequels.
Until we get to Ghostface in Scream 1996. Like, I think he's kind of like the last iconic slasher character, because we get 93, 94, 95, like were the first 3 sequels, or the first 3.
Fairness, I think the word icon has become relevant now, because he's, I mean, if you appear in 6 films or 7.
The comedy is not as well developed here. It gets better as it goes along. It feels like, Jennifer Aniston and the human characters are supposed to be delivering the funny lines. Like you said, that kind of darker Freddy humor that our Leprechaun is delivering, but he becomes much more jokey and less of a horror film and more of a comedy with gore.
Well, in my opinion, the comedy ventures off in all sides and goes really like this and left and right. So there's something to be said about that too throughout the franchise. But I think what I do like is like how they introduce the character. Like the first scenes, they really they keep him in the dark, like
literally
what you would do in a creature feature. You just show a little bit, keep things luminous. And to that extent, I think if you really want to watch only 2 films that capture the essence of the franchise, the first one and the last one, Leprechaun Returns. If you can handle that, you're good to go for all the other nonsensical sequels. So
yeah, and I love like some of the little bits, like the how the guy's company is called 3 Guys Who Paint.
Yep.
And just little touches like that.
And you get the Clover mythology. There's a lot of mythology that gets introduced in the first one, which makes sense. Like to kind of like here's the rules that we're going to be playing by, which is funny that they just kind of threw them all out the window.
I didn't like it that much when I watched it the first time, which is now I think like 25 years ago or something, like a long time ago. But I thought back then that it was a little bit bland, definitely not scary, not very funny. So it's like, well, not that special. But I liked it a lot better right now, because maybe because I'd seen the other ones too. And I think it's quite well done, but it's more like a normal, almost cute horror film compared to the other ones. It's definitely one that people should see just because it's the first and it's with Jennifer Aniston. But I think, it's quite entertaining, but don't expect too much gore or being scared. But I think it's a decent film, yeah.
In the early 2000s, I was trying to kind of like catch up on all my horror movies. And there had been ones like Leprechaun that I'd walked past on the video store shelves for years and years. And I was kind of like, okay, for the big franchise ones, I'm at least going to watch the first one. And if I like that, then maybe I would go back for more. And Leprechaun, I watched and I was kind of like, it's fine. Like it didn't blow my mind. I was like, there's no way I'm going to watch. At that point, there were 6, I think. I was like, there's no way I'm going to watch, 5 more of these. So eventually, here we are, again, like you, Vanessa, probably like 20 years later and going, okay, I will finally walk that road. And I would say, this is one of my least favorite of the bunch. I like them better as they go along, because I feel like everything just kind of loosens up and they say, we can do anything with this guy. We can send him to space. We can put him in the ghetto. We can do whatever we want with him and people will enjoy it. Once they started like loosening up, then it became a lot more fun for me. I agree. The first one is a much more conventional story, but I think that's also kind of what hinders it from really, becoming what it is.
Well, I watched the first one because of the rental days, because it got a pretty good distribution here. It was in all rental stores, the first one.
Yep.
And At the time, it went down with me as a fun horror snack.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, nothing more, nothing less.
Yeah.
It's decently enough made for the budget that they made it on, and the special effects were done. We should mention him right away already,
Yes,
because
Gabe Bartolos. Yeah.
those were like, how do you call it, an attraction in the film already in the first one.
And I mean, it did get released, and the first one got a theatrical release, and it did great business. Again, I think it was something new for slasher fans that were, you know, kind of exhausted by the exploits of the usual, you know, Michael and Jason and Freddy. But yeah, it was very successful, and that led to the sequel. And then after that became a straight to video kind of franchise. We should also mention that this is Trimark. Any fan of low budget or B movie schlock will recognize that opening logo from Trimark. I was like, oh my gosh, I haven't seen, you know, that logo in forever. Gabe Bartolos, you were mentioned, he did the makeup effects for Frank Henenlotter's Basket Case 2 and 3. But yeah, he's somebody who I recognized his name from the credits, and I went, okay, cool.
He directed also like 1 or 2 passion projects
Yes.
films, like Skin Deep.
And Saint Bernard, I think, is his as well.
But you can tell he likes to go nuts with the special effects. I mean,
yeah.
And the more practical, the better. Maybe to wrap up this, the first entry here, Mark Jones went on to do his second film as a director, or third, I don't know, Rumpelstiltskin, which is quite similar. But actually, it's just a more energetic effort.
Okay.
I'd say a better film because of that. He got it, I mean, right at that point. I mean, the nasty humor and the horror.
I think it's also one of his only films, this and Rumpelstiltskin. Or did he do a lot? I don't think so.
I don't think he did much. I was looking at his credits and I was like, oh, you know, once you've made Leprechaun and Rumpelstiltskin, where else can you go from there?
And I would say if you thought Leprechaun was okay, but nah, watch Rumpelstiltskin and see what you think of that. Because
yes, it's definitely less entertaining.
When it comes to standalone films, if Leprechaun the first is a standalone one, and you watch Rumpelstiltskin afterwards, and more fun with it. It's more entertaining.
With Rumpelstiltskin?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Maybe I should watch it again then.
He's so mean. Yeah. And he wants to steal babies all the time.
See, it's always about little people stealing things. Let's go ahead and lunge forward, because we got a lot of ground to cover. Leprechaun 2 from 1994. He's less interested in his gold this time around and more interested in having a bride. And that's kind of like a beginning of where we see where this franchise is going or not going. Here's a question for the panel. Do we think this is a different Leprechaun each time?
Doesn't feel like it, no.
Well, the timelines don't match up. First movie, they say he's X years old. Well, I don't remember how many, but in the second movie, they mention a much older age.
Yeah, he says he's like 1,000 years old.
Yeah, so that's why I take it as two different Leprechauns who just happen to be played by the same guy.
Yeah, that's my thought, is that it is kind of like the Waldemar Daninsky thing, where every single Leprechaun looks and acts like Warwick Davis, but they're different Leprechauns. I don't think they're the same Leprechaun showing up.
Oh, I never thought about it that way.
Well, I just can't really go with that 100% because it's always Warwick Davis playing the character. And I just...
with the same personality as well. So yeah, it really feels like the same Leprechaun to me.
But also, what they do keep for all the films is the Leprechaun character itself. All the rules and the mythology, they keep on changing it.
Right.
But his trademarks really keep on returning. So for me, it's
all the Leprechauns act like Warwick Davis. Like, what if every Leprechaun, you know, is just, that's how all the Leprechauns are? That's the only way I can get into this franchise.
Maybe also, because he's been in space, right? In the future, maybe in the future they cloned him and they keep sending him.
There we go. There we go. And and there's a Terminator thing where they keep sending him back in time. Okay, now
we have a new script now for the next Leprechaun movie.
Yeah, he wants to get married. That's where we are now.
And we have a guy who's like he does tours of underground Hollywood, takes people around in a hearse. The guy who plays Uncle Morty, I think he's really funny. I think I think he probably gives the best performance in the entire franchise.
He's also in Vamp. He's the announcer in the club of the announcing the dancers.
I vaguely remember that.
I did think it was an interesting twist to have the backstory of, him wanting the bride in the past and the new girl being the descendant of that bride. Really like how they capture the leprechaun at the end. I thought that was pretty clever. But overall, yeah, this one just kind of came and went for me.
Yeah, it's one of the films in the franchise that I like the least. It just didn't work for me, the fact that he's looking for a bride. It sounded a bit ridiculous, but not in a funny way. Yeah, I wasn't impressed with this one.
Well, back then I also rented it. I probably thought it was okay, but I really forgot a lot about it. And then when I rewatched, catching up with all the franchise, that's also some years ago, it didn't work for me. Now watching it back, I just was chuckling on and giggling on several occasions because of what they did with the character. Well, it starts already that how he gets resurrected through a tree or something. It's like, where did that come from? And then it's the first film where he starts doing his rhyming thing.
Yes, the limericks and stuff. Yeah.
And that was like, and then you get to the kills, which are pretty creative and absurd and ridiculous. And
it's funnier, yeah.
With the little go-kart scene, it's ridiculous. I mean,
one thing I wish they had kept, because one thing I liked in the first one was how he couldn't help. He had a shoe obsession. Like he had to polish them. So like when they started throwing shoes, like that was he was helpless. He kept distracting him. But I agree. I think this is one of those franchises, a rare franchise, where I think it gets better for me. I like 2 more than 1. I like 3 more than 2. I like 4 more than 3. This is a very strange franchise for me.
Absolutely. Can you remind me how he dies in this one?
Like a spike through his heart or something?
It's the wrought iron.
Yeah.
They throw out the 4-leaf clover and now it becomes an iron thing that he's allergic to. But yeah, again, we're changing up the mythology. We're already kind of setting the stage for that. If we're ready to move on to Leprechaun 3, where we're in Vegas, this is where I feel like, okay, now they're going, okay, we've got the groove now. Like we can do anything we want. The hallmark of this series is going to be putting the leprechaun in different situations, different times and period, etc.
I think that might be a strength and also a flaw. A strength in the sense like it keeps things snappy. Different situations, different gags, different killings, but it becomes a bit anecdotic, a bit repetitive in terms like there's not much of a story to...
And they don't build on each other.
Voila, and there's not much to accomplish. Right. Here it's one gag after another, basically. I mean, as of the second half of the film.
Well, and what does the leprechaun want in the third one? That's the thing. Like there's the stakes we keep starting at 0 with the stakes.
Voila, at least the gold. He always wants the gold.
But we get some really fun supporting characters in part 3 in Vegas.
Yes, like the magician is quite funny, and then his assistant. Definitely the way she dies. That's one of my favorite scenes in the entire franchise.
Yes.
Yeah, this is actually one of my favorites, maybe the favorite, because it's the one I laughed with the most. But I have to admit, there are also a couple of scenes in there that are some of the worst, maybe in the franchise, like the boyfriend turning into a leprechaun himself. It's like, what? No, don't do that.
There's only one leprechaun.
Apart from that, I thought this one was really, really funny. And yeah, it starts getting crazier, like with the leprechaun posing with a fake Elvis Presley, for example. And I thought it was really funny. Yeah,
it's the one that starts throwing most of the different stuff against the wall, like you mentioned already, Aaron.
Yeah,
and it's also directed by Trenchard-Smith.
Yes,
you can tell it's done by him because look at the other films he was doing around that time or as of then. He likes to have a poke fun at things.
Yeah. Brian Trenchard-Smith is an Australian filmmaker, kind of got things rolling with Turkey Shoot, but then he also did Out of the Body. And this film and Leprechaun 4 are the most fun. And I think that he's probably responsible for that.
And the most outrageous in general. This one I actually saw at the Biff.
Oh, wow.
With a crowd during a 4-night movie marathon, I think it was. When you watch it there, I mean, you're laughing your head off. And now rewatching it, I was a bit like, okay, there's still funny bits in that mindset from watching it with a crowd, to have fun with it.
Sure,
This is actually the one that made me want to do the Leprechaun podcast, because it was the one I really remembered. And I thought, like, yeah, I really had fun with that one. So the rest will be more or less the same.
I was less enthusiastic about this one. We'll have the leprechaun like doing his rhyming thing, but then just giving up on it like halfway through the rhyme. The kill where the woman who wants, the hot young body, like just it keeps going until she explodes.
Yeah,
that's my favorite.
It's so gross that I'm like, I can't watch that again.
I love that scene.
But I loved the part where the boyfriend starts turning into a leprechaun because he ingested some leprechaun blood, because that's just so completely absurd. Very creative. I'll give him props for that.
I like that. Caroline Williams is the actress who plays that character that we've been referring to, who's kind of in cahoots with the magician. The lips, the boobs, and the butt all start, getting enhanced. Yeah, that's where Gabe Bartalos, really has a chance to shine. I really like our female lead, our sexy magician's assistant. Lee Armstrong is her name, and I went and looked, and I think like she only did 3 movies, but I think she's one of my favorite female leads from any of the movies. I think she's a really solid comedic actress.
This one also really reminded me of the Wishmaster films. In this film, he really starts like granting wishes to people.
Right, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. And it really becomes more important in this film, and it kind of, goes the wrong way, of course, when people try to do it. Like with the woman with her exploding lips and body. That was also an element that I really liked, but it's less apparent in the other films.
Absolutely. Yeah. Here it's more like the wish thing is very pronounced. And in the other films, it's more like he tries to trick people and that's it to get what he wants.
Right.
Also, we've been talking about the woman who wants a better body, and you mentioned her name,
Caroline Williams. She was in Texas Chainsaw 2. Sorry.
2, yes.
Yep, 2.
That was such a surprise to see her in this film, and
it's a great part. It's a great part. I love it. I love her in this film. Yeah,
and she's really having fun with it.
Yeah, this is 10 years after Texas Chainsaw 2. I've seen her many times at conventions and things like that. So she's a very entertaining guest, but I hadn't seen her in this, and I was like, oh, this is actually one of the better things she's done, I think, outside of Texas Chainsaw 2.
Well, with regards to the final product or the actual movie, I don't know, but her role, she gives it her all. I think in this one, his demise is a bit less memorable, even though it involves a lot of fire. I mean, they set him on fire, he flies through the air.
Right.
There's no explosion.
He does kind of come into his own in terms of the comedy. Like, when he's like entertaining the masses, as a magician.
Definitely the funniest for me.
Well, then let's dive into Leprechaun 4, where he goes where all good horror icons go, into space. I can't remember, is this before or after Critters went to space? Because this predates Jason going to space, because that wasn't until 2001.
Hellraiser going to space, that was the 4th one.
That's the first one, I think. Hellraiser was first, and I think then, but you have to check it, I don't know. But
people's thoughts on Leprechaun 4 in space, because this was, again, I like this one a lot. I was like, this is really entertaining, and they are just throwing it all in there. Like, what, you want some aliens? Sure, we can do that. You want some RoboCop? Sure, we can do that too.
A giant Leppy?
Oh man, yeah, right, yeah.
That's maybe the best part, the giant leprechaun.
Agreed.
Well, the mitten spider is
so good.
Something else.
I love how completely insane this movie is. It didn't have to be a leprechaun. They could have put like anything in there. With there's Dr. Mittenhand who ends up being the weird spider creature thing. So many weird kills and. The like stupidity of the space princess sentencing the guys to death by showing her goods. It's just, this movie is nuts. And, I wouldn't, personally, I don't really consider it a horror movie because it's never scary. but I do think it's a very fun movie.
Well, the basic plot, again, he's back to romance now. Like he wants to have a bride again. Well, the leprechaun gets killed on the home. He has a home planet, by the way. Like it's the planet of the leprechauns, apparently. He gets killed, but then he somehow comes back to life through some guy's Johnson when he's having sex. And like that's how he's resurrected on the ship. And it's like once you go on that route, you're just like, okay, anything can happen here.
Apparently, also, I read it in an interview online somewhere. Brian Trenchard-Smith again returns to direct.
Yep.
They wanted him to do a second one, and he pitched that first scene, like with there's something going up inside somebody's Johnson, and that's how it regenerates and there were like co-producers or whatever, assistants at the table, and they were like, oh my God. But then the head of the studio suddenly said, I like this. Let's take it from there. And he definitely did take it from there.
Like, there's so much going on. This, like you get the blood extracted from the princess, and that gets injected into Mittenhand, and that turns him into the spider. I forget how the leprechaun gets big. Like, how did that even happen?
They have a ray, like a
yeah,
shrinking and enlarging ray.
That's right. The shrinking, because they're shrinking down his gold so that they can transport it. But I guess if you flip it the other way,
a cargo shrinker or something.
Right. Vanessa, how does this one land for you?
Not very well. I agree that it's the most insane movie of all, but I didn't laugh a single time. I just, it's crazy. It's a lot of ideas mashed together like this, but I don't think it's very well done. And most of the time I was just annoyed. I didn't like all the characters and no. Princess that the leprechaun wants to marry, like he's into blondes as well. He really has a type, the leprechaun. Or the cyborg man in the spaceship, it didn't work for me either. No, I don't like this one.
And this time he wants to marry a princess because his goal now is to become king of the universe.
Right. And he wants, because he wants all the gold, right? Like if he marries the princess, then he becomes the de facto king of that realm, and he gets all the gold there.
The series finally makes sense now. I have to admit that.
A little megalomaniac.
Well, and I think what we're finding is that there's a leprechaun for everybody. There's a leprechaun movie for everybody. If you don't like this one, try another. You'll find one that you do like eventually.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree.
Now that you mentioned that, it's this is the only one that a friend of mine came over one evening to watch movies, and I told him we were doing this preparation.
Yeah.
And I was at Leprechaun 4 in space at that point, so we put it on, and he had a blast with it. He's like, this is one of the most absurd things I've seen so far. So there you go.
Yeah, don't listen to me.
There's one little thing I was a bit bummed about how they used the Leprechaun and Warwick Davis in this movie, because he also stops rhyming in this one. He had skills for it, or the writers did, but
in space, no one can hear you rhyme.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go.
So then we come back to Earth, and we go into the hood. I have to say, I was kind of like, really? Like, this is where we're going to go? Now, that said, like, I know there's a huge Black audience for horror films, and I think they were looking to cater to that. As far as the story itself goes, I actually was kind of impressed by how seriously they took it while still having fun with it. Black characters trying to get out of their situation, like that was very much in vogue in the 90s with Boys in the Hood and things like that. It feels like a natural progression, or at least something to try. So I'm not opposed to it. And I think for what it is, it actually works better than I would have imagined. I'm curious to hear what other people thought.
Yeah, it's quite well done, I think, and well directed, and they put a lot of detail into the characters as well, which is quite surprising for this type of movie. Also, I think the actors are not that bad, definitely compared to In Space. Yeah, it's generally not really like my type of Leprechaun film, but I really thought there were some really insane moments in here, and especially the very last scene when it turns into like a musical with the leprechaun singing. that was really one of those moments that I was like, what's going on here? What am I watching?
Well, Vanessa, at some point when you were starting off listing the compliments for this film, I thought you were talking about the second Hood movie, Back to the Hood, because this one really misfired for me, and it still did on a rewatch. I mean, the acting, the actors really rubbed me the wrong way. And what all you said about well directed, and I mean, I would like to keep those compliments for Back to the Hood. I mean, the rhymes, the music wasn't really on. I mean, we've had Snoop Dogg and Dr. Dre in the 90s, and then they come up with this. It's like,
But also, I think we should take into account that this is really made for a different type of audience, and
but that
it really turned the Leprechaun into an even bigger cult classic thanks
Sure.
to this film.
around that time there was also, I mean, it reminded me of the blaxploitation wave in the 70s.
Yep.
The 90s really had, like you said, those quality movies by Spike Lee, like Boys in the Hood, Clockers, movies like that. They
Yeah,
had
Do the
tried
Right
to
Thing, all of that.
they had tried to mix horror also with Tales from the Hood
Right?
in the early 90s. By the time the late 90s came, there was this low budget independent wave coming up, like Charles Band with Full Moon teamed up with Big City Pictures, I think. And they were cranking out, as of 1999, 2000, a couple of totally, black horror in the hood kind of type of deals.
Yeah.
With The Vault, Crypt, The Horrible Dr. Jones, and Ragdoll. Then, I mean, it makes sense then also on a bigger, I mean, like a medium budget level, there was Snoop Dogg doing Bones
Right?
in 2001. So it makes sense that there were people and producers having this idea, like, we can do this with Leprechaun.
Right. Trying to cater toward that audience.
Absolutely. So, and in that sense, this one, the first the first Leprechaun in the Hood, it is better than the ones that are listed by Big Pictures and Full Moon, what they were doing at the time.
I think the acting is actually really solid, and it's not as kind of jokey as Vegas and Space. Like, this feels like a more grounded, except for when the Leprechaun's like trading the joint back and forth with Ice-T.
Yeah, it was a bit too much of that and too late in the game, because we just felt all that during the whole 90s, really. And to see that again, it's like, come on, guys, come up with something.
Eric, you had thoughts on both of these films.
Yeah, well, Back to the Hood I like a lot, but in the Hood, wasn't real big on it. It was fun to see, Ice-T act back from when he was still more known for rapping than acting. And I did like the scams that the three main characters try to pull, like saying the guitar belonged to Jimi Hendrix, and it's not even a left-handed guitar. But yeah, overall, this one didn't really do it for me.
The gags, there were good jokes and all that in it, but they were not related to the Leprechaun at all. And then there was the whole thing with the flute. What? Where?
I see, again, I'm like, they throw something new in, like, oh, he's got a magic flute and it has mystifying powers. I'm like, awesome.
Oh, and also really important to say, if I can spoil it a little bit, this is the only Leprechaun film in which he doesn't get killed.
That's right. He's
he ends up teaching the guy everything he knows, right?
That's right. He's like the manager of Postmaster.
Something like that, yeah.
But really, while you liked, Vanessa, while you liked the rhyming thing at the end, for me,
the song, yeah. I'm a fan of the song. I don't know if you guys think of the Lap in the Hood song, but I love it.
Up to no good. Come on.
And he keeps hypnotizing the chicks along the way. I mean,
don't be fly hose or whatever.
It's bad taste, of course, but
it knows what it is. It knows what it's doing for sure. I do wish, and I mean, because we're probably living in a golden age, or lived through the golden age of rap and hip hop. Like the rhymes are pretty rough. I'm kind of like,
please say
it. They could be better rhymes. It could be just a more clever. But I mean, even Ice-T, like his early stuff is much better than what we get in the Leprechaun movie.
Man, I prefer Ice-T even in like an Albert Pine Peon movie, like like Mean Guns. He's in there.
Mm-hmm.
Remember Trespass?
Yep.
From Walter Hill, I think.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, and then to see him do that, it's like, well, thank you for being in this movie at least. But still.
Yeah. So let's talk about Back to the Hood, because this is, we're in the 6th movie at this point, and the idea that he's going to go back to the hood, I was kind of like, oh, like, because there was more hood to explore. Apparently, there were more, urban cliches to exploit. I've already heard a couple people say they like this movie better than 5. Thoughts on Back to the Hood?
I think objectively, it's indeed a better film. But it's also one of the films in the franchise that I hardly remember. And I didn't see it that long ago, but I really have a hard time remembering all the scenes.
Well, you've got the one guy who's like majorly into smoking weed. You got the other guy who's into dealing. And then you got the woman who wants to get out. She wants to go to Kansas to go to university. I'm like, who wants to go to Kansas? But anyway, and then she has her friend. So, like that's the basic story. And then I forget where how the leprechaun gets reintroduced.
Yeah, well, they fall through the community center that never got built and find his gold. And then honestly, I don't remember how the leprechaun himself comes back, but they start spending the gold, and so then of course he wants it back.
Well, there's the thing, the film just blasts off kind of with this priest doing a battle with a leprechaun on a construction site.
Yes.
And well, he kind of wins, but he also dies, but he sends the Leppy, back to hell.
Right, that's right.
And then the whole thing with the characters comes into play with the gold. They find it, and he gets resurrected during the first act.
Well, because he was a statue in the 5th one, and he's also a statue in the 3rd one, right? So those are the 2 statue movies. And then this one, he gets dragged down to Elf, back up again. It's like, if he's going back to the hood, but he's still not the same type of leprechaun. Like, just like, guys, like, you had a perfect opportunity to just have a through line, but nope, we're not doing that.
Well, here's a little bit of trivia also that's coming from the director.
I was going to say, you listened to the commentary for this one, right? Yeah.
I did.
Okay.
And actually, he really wanted to do a Leprechaun movie. He pitched his idea to producers, and initially it was a story. The story would take place during spring break, and it would be set on a tropical island, like probably a lot of like a teen slasher kind of thing. And then the producer said, like, okay, we like your ideas, but can you set it in the hood again? So there's probably, it would have, from a more profitable kind of sequel viewpoint, that's how that happened.
And I don't know if like part 5 in the hood, I don't know if that was a big success, and that's why they went, we need to go back to the hood.
Apparently, yes. Apparently, yeah.
I mean, number 5 made money, and then those other hood horrors were still going on.
It's not so much to do with the leprechaun. It's more just the relationships between the main characters. I felt like that was actually an engaging story. Like the 2 were a former couple where he, owed her a bunch of money and he was going to pay her back, but she didn't want to be paid back with drug money and all that, all those dramas, and then you throw a homicidal leprechaun in the mix, and that just makes it better, especially, when he kills a guy with a bong. So,
True. And him taking hits from the bong, that was also pretty, because he's inhaling that smoke, which is of course herbal stuff, not the real deal. But that.
Well, this is the one where they introduced the clovers back in, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And here's a fun little fact also, like, at one point, there's a close-up of a clover that they then, make into hollow points with the bullets.
Right.
But the close-up was they had a 3-leaf clover and they had to digitally.
I saw that.
And you don't notice it. It looks like a 4-leaf.
Oh, I noticed it. I was like, what is going on with that clover there? Anyway.
I didn't notice it. But the director also said, like, and Warwick also said on the commentary, like, oh, we didn't have that digital stuff in the first movie. We had a 3-leaf one where they actually glued on a 4th one because we couldn't find a 4-leaf clover.
Yeah.
And then the director also mentioned, like, I wish we would have had that because that shot cost us a lot of money digitally.
Right. Well, Warwick Davis, I mean, this is the last time we see him as the Leprechaun, And what I've read is that he kind of, once he started having children, he didn't want to make any more horror films. He wanted to make movies that his kids could watch and that he could feel good about. He's very grateful to the Leprechaun for, helping him with his career and establishing him as an icon.
He has admiration also for the director of Part 6. To me, it's a great, let's say, swan song for him. Also because if we are talking Leprechaun movies here, and his part in this one was considerable bigger than even the first Hood film, the previous one. There's a lot more physicality, physical acting in this one coming from him.
Yeah,
he gets to fight, and he gets shot, and he doesn't give up, and there's just sort of energy coming from it that the previous one in the Hood didn't have.
Is this the one where he has the shillelagh, or is that the other one? Is that the fifth one where he has the staff that he whacks people with? I think that was not Part 5.
Yeah, it's not this one, I think.
Yes.
I remember him fighting with Ice-T in the club, and I feel like he had the shillelagh.
And what Eric said also, just that resonated with me too, that for the Part 6, Back to the Hood, the characters just are a bit better written.
Sure.
And the cast is just, giving it a little extra in terms of portraying their roles.
Less cliches and more, grounded, realistic characters. And then you got a murderous leprechaun.
This is the one where Warwick Davis shines the most in his role as the leprechaun. He's given a lot to play with and to do.
That's for sure. Agreed. If we move forward and say goodbye to Warwick Davis, and we get Leprechaun Origins from 2014, and this is just the most hated Leprechaun movie online. And I'm curious to hear what people's thoughts are on this one.
It's my most hated.
My most hated too. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it has nothing to do with the other Leprechaun films. Nothing at all.
Right.
And
That's the whole
the
point.
first part of the films, you hardly see what's happening. It's very cliche. Everything is just vague and no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not well done.
I have strong negative feelings about this movie. Like, if they had just called it something else and not made it part of the Leprechaun franchise, then it would have been a fine but not particularly interesting monster movie. But I know they call him a leprechaun, and yeah, he takes some gold, but there's nothing leprechaun-y about him. It's just a generic,
What does it
generic
look like?
monster.
It's just weird and not good.
Yeah, I mean, he looks more like the I don't remember what they're called, but the things from The Descent than a leprechaun.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
And
Only
But you almost make it sound good if you say it that way. They're not that interesting.
Here's the question. If you look at it as just a creature feature and not a leprechaun movie, would you be more forgiving?
No.
See,
Well, I am, but anyway, that's another.
I mean, I still wouldn't like it because I think just taken as just a creature feature, it's pretty blah, not especially interesting.
Yeah.
But it's, I don't know, adequate.
It's fine, but adequate.
But you've got no rhyming, you've got no wish granting, no magic beams, no pot of 100 pieces of gold, no polishing shoes, just nothing, literally nothing that you think of from the other Leprechaun movies.
Well, and I think that's my, if you're going to call it Origins, it sounds like it's the origin for the franchise. And I think that's misleading to Leprechaun fans. As you said, if they called it something else, if they just called it straight up Leprechaun, it would have been a different movie. And I think we would have been some might have been more forgiving. But to call it Origins, it makes it sound like because it's part of the franchise, it makes it sound like, okay, we're going to find out where Warwick Davis' character came from. And that's not it at all. It should have just been called something else. John Pattis said it should have been called Irish Hellhound. And I'm like, yes, Irish Hellhound would have been great. But I agree with Vanessa. I think, because I was really kind of rooting for this movie. I was like, I like the fact that it's a big swing in that they're trying something completely different. They're giving us a completely different version of the Leprechaun. It's proficiently directed. I mean, in that it's very much kind of paint by numbers horror in the 2000s. I don't think it's particularly innovative, but I was really pulling for this movie, and it doesn't quite carve out its own space. It is just a generic monster movie. It could have been anything. The fact that they call it a leprechaun is like, okay. And the fact that they got a WWE wrestling star to play the leprechaun, who does like Irish leprechaun shtick as part of his WWE stuff, and then to have him completely encased in latex and doing nothing related to being a leprechaun, I was like, oh man, what a missed opportunity. Like if you're going to hire, somebody with a personality, to not let him use that personality just seems like a big mistake.
I think I was the only one who went into this movie like, yes, I'm going to take a break from these leprechaun movies and watch a creature feature.
Sure.
And that's why it worked. I did not think of the wisecracking Leppy like we know him. I did not think of Warwick Davis. I just, come on, give me a tight creature feature here and a serious one at it, because that was their attempt.
Yep.
That preferably has nothing to do with the whole franchise. And it's what I got.
I went into this movie with the same intentions. I also knew beforehand that it wasn't like a real leprechaun movie, that it was more a creature feature, that it couldn't be compared. But for me, it wasn't a good creature feature. So I was really bored.
It was moderate. It was like average. It's not. It doesn't excel. And there were some moments. There were a couple of kills, like the axe to the woman's head. That was like, whoa. Let's rewind that. That was heavy. But again, also in the director's or the filmmaker's defense, to my knowledge, understanding, they didn't want to go make out a leprechaun.
Absolutely.
I think afterwards or during production or getting finances or whatever, there was some part that already grew into making it part of the franchise.
Right.
Probably from a distribution point of view. But it's clearly not intended.
On the behind the scenes, like it's clear that this was always part of the franchise. It didn't just get kind of co-opted in and become a Leprechaun movie. Like they knew they were making a Leprechaun movie and they knew they were trying to do something different with it. Again, I think it's one of those where if I was making a Halloween movie and I put Michael Myers in a clown mask throughout, people would be like, no, he has to wear the William Shatner mask. And if I had him talking, I'd be like, well, it's a different interpretation. They'd be like, fuck you. This is a Halloween movie. I want certain things in my Halloween movie. And I think that's the thing. Like people go into a Leprechaun movie, they want certain things in their Leprechaun movie. Doesn't matter if it's good or bad. They're like, you said this was vanilla and this tastes like chocolate and I don't like it. Even though I like chocolate, I don't like this because you told me it was going to be vanilla.
I think you make a good comparison with Halloween. I mean, it's like setting up and I'll just take the ball. It kind of has the same effect, this Leprechaun Origins film, like the effect Halloween 3 Season of the Witch had. Like, this is not part of it. This is not what we wanted. It sucks.
Even though everybody likes Halloween 3 now.
Voila. So it's like, maybe in 10 years or so, they say, wow, this is kind of like The Descent. But
getting back to the franchise that feels like the franchise, Leprechaun Returns, 2018, directed by Stephen Kostanski of Astron 6. And I agree with Eric. I think this is absolutely one of the best in the franchise. It was like, wow. How is it that the 8th film in the franchise turns out to be the best one?
Because they finally got it right.
By going back to the original mythology.
I do like the fact that they just ignored all the sequels and just made it tie in with the first one.
Yep.
And in that sense, they finally, he amps up everything. Plus, for a modern age also, modern times, he pretty much gets everything right with this film.
He's really good at comedy horror. Like you said, Vanessa, like he does... Psycho Gorman, Manborg. Yes, Manborg is him as well. I think this is funnier, and the gore is good. The character, the storyline, just all of it really seems to gel.
A bit of poking fun at social commentary topics in between. The pacing is great. The kills are creative. The gore is fun.
And you bring back
jokes
Mark
are
Ralston.
creative. The jokes are creative as well. Like the teens making selfies with the leprechaun. Yeah.
Even the non-likable characters are fun in a non-likable way. I mean,
Yeah.
unlikable in a fun way.
Yeah, I like the ways it ties into the first one, especially making the lead the daughter of Jennifer Aniston's character.
Right.
Like that was a nice way to have some continuity. And when they find the piece of paper in the basement where the previous group had listed all the leprechauns' powers, I thought that was great. And I mean, yeah, just overall, I think it's probably the most well written of the series. And it also has my favorite kill when I believe it's the solar panel falls off the roof and
Yes.
slices the person in half this way. But that was very clever. But yeah, overall, I thought it was well written, well acted, well directed, and an enjoyable film.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Suzanne Kelly is our screenwriter.
Yeah, I also agree with Eric that this is by far the best film in the franchise. And my favorite scene is when one of the characters from the first film comes back. We see him again. I can't really remember his name. And it's the same actor.
Ozzy is the character,
Ozzy,
and
yeah,
Mark
Ozzy.
Ralston. Mark
Yeah,
Ralston
and
is the actor.
it's the same actor again.
Yes.
But then we see him just like we're so happy to see this guy again. And then, spoiler alert, he gets killed off almost right away.
I know. I was
in the
bummed.
most gruesome way, because the leprechaun gets born through his body, and that's so gruesome. And because you like this character so much, also from the first film, you really don't want anything bad to happen to him.
I know.
Yeah, and it's awful the way he dies. Yeah, very well done, the gore. Very well done.
Also, the way that character is introduced, that was so cool with the abandoned gas station. He shows up and he's kind of this weirdo, and she doesn't trust him. And then they do have some time to bond again. And then, well, he dies because of the resurrection of Leppy, which is kind of like finally an original way to resurrect him.
Agreed. And we should talk about the fact that this is, again, not Warwick Davis, but Lyndon Porco takes over the role. And what are people's thoughts on his interpretation? I really like it.
I prefer this version of the Leprechaun. Maybe I'm not supposed to say this, and with all due respect to Warwick Davis, which is really like an iconic part, but I prefer this version.
Yeah, I mean, he's just like he's just a tad bit more wicked than Warwick ever was in his role, except maybe for the Back to the Hood Part 6 there. But then there's a lot of years in between, so now we get a version. Like I said, the Leprechaun itself also got a bit of an upgrade.
Yes,
it's like how director Stephen Kostanski really knew all the material and took the best bits and just vamped them a bit up. That's what we get. I really like this version of the Leprechaun.
Yeah.
I like him a lot. Also, a little extra thing, because throughout the whole films there are so many little gags, like in part 2 with the go-kart. Now he gets to fly on a camera drone, on a drone gun. It's like, what? Why? Good one.
Yeah, I agree. He's this new Leprechaun seems a little more vicious than Warwick Davis's was. His way of speaking just seems a little less jokey and more threatening, and I thought it was a good choice.
Yeah, there's a genuine sinister quality to him.
And they put some effort again in writing some decent rhymes.
Yes. Yeah.
They're just wicked. They're not dumb.
And I also have to give credit to Lyndon Porco, because he's doing some Warwick Davis elements, but he's also bringing something fresh as well as an actor. And I think that's a really tough line to walk when you're inheriting a role from somebody, is that you want to give the same quality that people enjoyed, but you also don't want to just try and do like a carbon copy.
I think he definitely built on the whole body of work of Warwick Davis, and he built on that.
But at the same time, it's so different. And like Aaron says, it's really difficult to do.
I haven't looked up what Lyndon Porco, what else he's done, where he came from or what he's done since then. But, just based on this performance, I would check out more of his stuff, and I hope he gets further opportunities. I think this one went over pretty well with the core audience. Like, I feel like horror fans genuinely like this installment.
It gets everything right. amps it up, and you can even watch it as a standalone movie for a new generation if you haven't seen the previous films.
Right. You don't have to see the first one to watch this one.
Voila. So that was well done on pretty much all levels, I would say.
Also, I would recommend maybe for people who hasn't seen any Leprechaun movies yet, like maybe start with the first one, then do the new Leprechaun movie, this one, and then maybe try others. But like really the first one and the last one, these are the must-sees.
Yeah, agreed. And if you like that, then definitely, go back and check out some of the other ones. I do want to do a quick, and this will be off the cuff, but picking your favorite and kind of do your pecking order. Mine would probably be Leprechaun Returns, Leprechaun 4, Leprechaun 3, Leprechaun 1, the first one, 5, 6, and Origins are probably my bottom of the heap.
Yeah, Leprechaun Returns is my number 1. Leprechaun would be my number 2. Leprechaun 4 in Space is my number 3. Back to the Hood would be my number 4. Obviously, Origins will be my number 8.
That's your bottom.
Yep. And in between, they're all kind of interchangeable as far as quality in my eyes.
Leprechaun Returns. Have to admit, I really have a soft spot for Leprechaun in Las Vegas. Also, even though there are a lot of things we can comment on that one that aren't that good, but I think it's just funny. So that's my number 2. Number 3, the first Leprechaun film. And then maybe Leprechaun in the Hood, if I really have to pick another one. And Leprechaun Origins, I just put it in the bin. It's not in the list at all.
It's not even in the list. There's only 7 Leprechaun movies.
Excluded.
And Gert?
Well, I'm going to start off by excluding Leprechaun Origins because it's not a Leprechaun movie to me.
It's not really part of the franchise.
Well, I may like it, I may not like it, but it's not on the table here for me. Okay, Leprechaun. So off the bat, it's both best and favorites. That's a one package deal. So Leprechaun Returns. Oh, Leprechaun is Space, just to go off the rails first. Leprechaun Back to the Hood. Leprechaun 2. Leprechaun in Vegas. Number 5 would be last. Yeah. But I kind of skipped the first one because it needs to go with Leprechaun Returns.
I feel like 2 is the one that doesn't quite land with a lot of people. Like I feel like it's just another Leprechaun movie.
Well, here's the thing. On this rewatch, it landed better with me now than Las Vegas did, actually.
So that one kind of up around like 3 or 4 in your list? Wow. Okay. Well, thank you all for suggesting this. It was indeed the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, was knowing that we would get to have this conversation. And I get to say, I get the T-shirt that says I watched all 8 Leprechaun movies.
We should have a 4-leaf clover.
We all do.
Yeah, I'll get on the printing of those. I'll send them out pronto.
And are you guys celebrating St. Patrick's Day normally, or is that not up your alley at all?
Oh well, Chicago is a huge Irish community, so St. Patrick. I mean, we're the ones who dye the river green every year, so it's a big deal here. How about you guys? Do you do anything in Brussels?
Me, not at all. Yeah, it's a lot of people are celebrating, but it just passed me by. It's I'm not that much of a drinking person either, so I think that's important, or I have the impression it's important for St. Patrick's Day. But on the other hand, the 17th of March is always an important day for me, because it's also the day of Saint Gertrude, who is the patron saint of cats.
Oh my gosh.
There we go. And it's the same day as St. Patrick's Day. And apparently Saint Gertrude, she was also Belgian.
How did St. Patrick and St. Gertrude have to share the same day? Like they couldn't spread them out and give them each their own day?
Apparently.
That's just rude. That is rude.
So for me, St. Patrick, it's like out I celebrate Saint Gertrude.
Any final thoughts?
I was somewhat skeptical about watching this entire franchise, but I'm glad I did. I had a good time.
I really thought it was something that was missing as well. That, yeah, I didn't see that many Leprechaun films before. So I'm happy I've seen them all, even though I didn't like them all.
I'd say this is one of the most ridiculous things we pulled off so far. On your
Absolutely.
channel.
Can we
Roseanne-
find something even more ridiculous to do?
We'll have to go back to the drawing board because something more ridiculous than all 8 Leprechaun movies in one go is pretty.
Maybe the viewers have an idea. Then
That's
they
right.
can
That's right.
put it in the comments.
Leave something in the comments below.
What should we all watch that is really, really ridiculous?
And don't say the Puppet Master movies because I'm not doing it. I'll thank you all again so much. This is super fun. Looking forward to having you back on the show again very soon. And until next time, keep searching, keep exploring, and keep sharing the scare.